On this day in history, January 9th, 1822, the Portuguese Prince Pedro I of Brazil decides to stay in Brazil against the orders of the Portuguese King João VI, beginning the Brazilian independence process. The following is an excerpt from the Encyclopaedia Britannica 1944 edition regarding the steps towards Brazil's independence. Although Dom João enjoyed a certain degree of personal popularity, his government, corrupt and extravagant, aroused much opposition, which was still further increased by the fermentation of liberal ideas produced by the French Revolution. In Pernambuco, a revolt broke out in 1817, and was put down with difficulty after a republic had been formed which lasted for 90 days. Still more critical was the situation in Lisbon. After the departure of the French, Portugal had been governed by an arbitrary and tyrannical regency. The growing discontent found vent in the Revolution of 1820. The regency was swept aside by the Cortes, which had not met for over a century, was summoned for the purpose of drawing up a constitution. The presence of Dom João in Portugal was imperative if the revolutionary movement was to be kept in hand. On April 22, 1821, he appointed his son, Dom Pedro, regent, and 2 days later set sail for Lisbon. The tasks confronting the young prince were truly formidable. Antagonisms between the Portuguese and Brazilians were becoming increasingly bitter, Republican propaganda was active, and, worst of all, Dom Pedro had to face responsibility of a separation of Brazil from Portugal as a result of the short-sighted policy of the Cortes at Lisbon. The majority of this assembly were in favor of restoring Brazil to her former status of colonial dependence. Without waiting for the Brazilian deputies, they proceeded to undo most of the reforms introduced into Brazil by Dom João. Fearful lest Dom Pedro might head a movement for independence, the prince was ordered to return to Europe in order to complete his political education. These acts aroused great indignation in Brazil. Supported by the majority of Brazilians, Dom Pedro openly defied the Cortes by his refusal to return to Lisbon. In January 1822, he formed a ministry in which the chief portfolios were held by two distinguished Paulistas, José Bonifácio de Andrada y Silva and his brother, Carlos Antonio. The former, known as the Patriarch of Independence, was a scholar of European reputation and proved at this critical juncture a tower of strength to the young regent. Events followed rapidly. On June 3rd, Dom Pedro convoked a legislative and constituent assembly. On September 7th, on the plain of the Ipiranga, near the city of São Paulo, he solemnly proclaimed the independence of Brazil, and on December 1st, 1822, was crowned emperor. With the cooperation of Lord Cochrane, an able British naval officer who had entered Brazilian service, the strong Portuguese garrisons were forced to return to Europe. Before the end of 1823, independence had become an accomplished fact, although Portuguese recognition was not secured until 1825.